Hello guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. It's me, Big Mike, and I know it's been so long since we last met. I've missed you guys so much, but I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to see you. You look nice, by the way. Are those new shoes you're wearing? But fam, I am absolutely stoked for the video today. Not only is this my first video back, but this is a subject I am very passionate about. Today's video is going to be my first foray into the world of computers, IT, and Linux. And not only is it going to be my first video in those subject areas, it's also going to be my first reaction video. Now, if you know anything about me, you know I'm very passionate about Linux, I'm very passionate about open source, and I'm very passionate about Ubuntu. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the latest release of Ubuntu, Ubuntu 22.04, LTS. Now, every 6 months, Ubuntu has a new release, but only every 2 years do they have a long-term supported release. So that's what LTS means. Now, things are a little crazy here. I'm going to attempt to give you a live reaction to all of this. Now, unfortunately, on some parts of the video, I can't, namely the portion of the video in which we're going to be looking at video games. Unfortunately, my computer only has free USB drive, not free USB drives, but free USB ports. So unfortunately, I can't be recording live, unfortunately. Or at least I can't record my voice live while playing. Which, speaking of USB...
So, Big Mike, what's up with the USB drive?
So that's a great question. So now, if you follow me on Twitter, maybe you've seen the post I made a couple weeks ago talking about this video, how this is my first video back and it's going to revolve around a USB drive. Well, I have my hard drive set up just as I want it. And I haven't really used this latest build of Ubuntu. I'm going into this as blind as possible. I'm trying to go into this without knowing as much as I possibly cannot know. Though unfortunately I follow a lot of accounts on Twitter in regards to Linux and Ubuntu, so it's impossible for me to go in there completely blind. But long story short, I'm not sure if I like this or not. I didn't like Ubuntu 20.04, so I don't want to go for all the hassle of installing a new operating system on my hard drive and all the work that entails, like moving my files off the hard drive, moving them back, and it's just a big headache. So instead of doing that, I've installed this on my USB drive, which is one of the really cool things about Linux. Most Linux distributions, if not all of them, can be fully installed and ran from a USB drive. And there's a really cool story I have to tell about that, but I'll save it for another day. Alright, so without further ado, let's jump into the video. Now, before we get too far into the video, there are a couple things I just want to talk about. First off, I've been using Ubuntu since November 2019. I started using it, and I only used it for like a week then. I gave it up and went back to Windows. Having been raised in Windows all my life, it was kind of confusing, frustrating. But then in 2020, around January, February, I had a major hard drive failure. This was the start of the global health crisis. And unfortunately, I didn't feel comfortable taking my computer out to get it repaired. So I did a full install of Ubuntu onto a USB drive, and I used that for about 5 or 6 months. But since then, I've fallen head over heels with Ubuntu. Now, one more thing I just want to discuss before going further. One common phrase you're going to hear me talk about here is open source or open source software. And that's computer software that's released under a license in which the copyright holder grants users the rights to use, study, change, and distribute the software and its source code to anyone for any purpose. I'm a huge supporter of that, and most of the Linux scene is filled with people who do support that, as well as software that's open source. In fact, even Linux and Ubuntu, for the most, well, Ubuntu is definitely open source. Most Linux, I can't say all. I'm not sure if all Linux distros are open source, but the vast majority are. So this is just a phrase you're going to hear me use frequently throughout this video. Alright, so now let's jump into this video proper. Welcome to Ubuntu 22.04, Jammy Jellyfish. Now, every distribution, every build of the Ubuntu distribution is named after an animal. 22.04, Jammy Jellyfish. 21.04, Henrietta Hippo. And my daily driver, 18.04, Bionic Beaver. Now, at the start of this, I want us to talk about the aesthetics. Now, I'm not going to dwell too long on the aesthetics because, you know, taste varies. Some people like it, some people don't. Everybody has their own opinion, and taste vary. Or as my grandmother so eloquently likes to put it, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. Now, if you notice, the first thing you'll see is a purple background. Now, the color purple is very important to Ubuntu, and it's kind of been its official color since at least Ubuntu 12.04. I never used 12.04, but I just saw screenshots of it, and every build I have used has used these colors. So please correct me if I'm wrong about that. Now, if you notice, also the background contains, or the background is a wallpaper of a jellyfish, whom I'm presuming is Jammy. In every build of Ubuntu comes with such a wallpaper. Henrietta Hippo had a wallpaper of a hippo. Bionic Beaver has a wallpaper of a beaver. However, many people have praised this particular wallpaper as being the best and most well-defined. And, I mean, I can see the merit. I like it. I'm more of a hippo guy myself, but I digress. Another thing this build of Ubuntu has been praised for, and again, I haven't been trying to look up information about this, but being that I follow so many Ubuntu and Linux accounts on Twitter, it's hard to avoid. But one thing I saw that people have praised was that this build includes several alternative wallpapers you can use if you're not feeling Jammy Jellyfish. And they look nice. They look nice for open source. Well, even if they're not open source, they still would look nice. And additionally, you can probably also add your own as well by clicking Add Picture. Now, another thing that's been praised by, I saw that was being praised a lot, was the fact that now Ubuntu includes a proper dark mode. So you see how it's white? So let's click dark mode. Oh. Now that looks sleek and sexy. And this is what your folders are going to look like. And really the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to the aesthetics, and unfortunately I couldn't show you a live picture of this because I'm not sure how to record the login screen, but I'll throw a picture up in the editing process. I love the splash screen. It's a huge step up from 18.04 and 20.04. It's very beautiful. Now, one thing I found really cool about this, and I'm not sure if it's intentional or if it's a coincidence, but the splash screen reminds me of the Zone splash screen from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. If you know me, you know that's my favorite game in all of gaming, and I can't seem to stop talking about it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the organization. and Jammy Jellyfish seems much more organized and less cluttered than previous builds. The taskbar now has a clear division between pinned apps and running apps. Also, what I really love here is that your drives, both those that are built in, your SSDs, your HDDs, as well as your removable media, now appear here, as opposed to out on the desktop, like in Ubuntu 18.04. Unfortunately, in 18.04, all your drives should appear out here all jumbled up, and it gives you a sense of clutteredness, or your desktop being cluttered. So this is a much more clean way of organizing, I believe. Hello guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. This is me, Big Mike, from the future. So unfortunately here I had gotten some details wrong when I was discussing the organization. Now here in Ubuntu 22.04, the apps are organized in a horizontal manner. And I like it. You know, you can scroll from the screen from left to right. However, in Ubuntu 18.04, the apps are organized in a vertical manner. So you scroll down. And that's good too. It's also like that in 20.04 as well. I will say they're about even for the most part, but I do like how in 22.04 you can see more apps per page, whereas in 18.04 and 20.04 it would take more. It would take more pages to display the same amount of apps. Maybe. Now the one thing I do wish was different, and maybe you can change this in the settings, is just the icon size. Now in previous builds the icon size was larger. And maybe there's a way to do that. So I want to give you a tour of the apps, or some apps you can find on Ubuntu. Now not all of these apps we're going to be looking at come pre-installed. I did install some ahead of time to kind of make this video go a bit more smooth. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to point that out as well, what comes pre-installed and what apps I had to install myself. The first app we're going to be looking at is Libreoffice, an open source Office suite alternative to Microsoft Office. Now, I've been using Libreoffice since my university time in the mid-2000s, and I've never had an issue with it. Now we can use this to make spreadsheets, we can use it to make PowerPoints, pretty much everything Microsoft Office can do, we can do this. We can do with this. Now I mostly use the word processor as a writer, and it's set up as close as it legally can be to Microsoft's word processor, or Microsoft Word. And I've never had any issues with it. Now, if you have like a specialty need, maybe you might run across some issues, but for the vast majority of people, LibreOffice will cover your daily needs. And just in case it can't, there are other open source Office suite alternatives available that you could try. But again, I've never had any issues with LibreOffice. Now let's turn our attention to web browsers. Now, web browsers are by far the most used application on any operating system. It doesn't matter if it's Linux based, if it's Mac OS, if it's Windows, iPhone OS, or even Android. By far, web browsers are the most used application. Now, Ubuntu and most Linux based distributions come built in with Firefox. And Firefox is an open source, privacy friendly web browser, one of the few, if not the only major web browser today not built on Chromium. So let's fire it up and see how it goes. Now you see it kind of took a little long for it to start. And unfortunately, one of the things I did come across is that Firefox, or the version that's included, is based on a snap. And unfortunately, coming off a cold boot or opening off a fresh start, it can start up slow. Now, fortunately, you can get other alternative forms of Firefox not built on Snap that run much faster from a cold start. But unfortunately, when it comes prepackaged with Ubuntu 22.04, is a bit slow. Now, after you open it and close it the first time, you don't have that issue. At least so I've read. And again, I wasn't really looking for information, but I just kind of came across it throughout my Twitter usage. You see, much faster. Now, so let's test this out and see how it goes. So let's search for VTubers. Alright, pretty standard stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. Now, one thing you'll notice, and this is true, and this has at least been my experience, using Ubuntu and other Linux distributions, surfing the web and downloading stuff tends to happen much faster. And the reason behind that is, at least I suspect, is that Linux distributions in general tend to be less resource hungry, tend to be lighter weight than Windows. And so you tend to get better performance in many regards. Now this is really cool because if you have an old computer laying around, Linux can be used to resurrect older machines. But that's a story for another day. Now, I like Firefox, and I like its philosophy, its open source philosophy, but unfortunately I find myself in a situation where I have to use Google Chrome. And as much as I'm not a fan of some of the Google's practices, I do have to use Google Chrome, unfortunately. But luckily, Google Chrome can be downloaded for Ubuntu and most Linux distributions, but you will have to download it separately. So let's fire it up and see what it looks like. Alright, so again, let's search for VTubers. And pretty standard stuff. Next up, we're going to talk about media players. Now, historically speaking, I haven't been a big fan of the media players that come included with Ubuntu. Now, for audio files, Ubuntu comes installed with an application called Rhythmbox. And it's okay, it gets the job done, but it's not my favorite. I mean, there's some organizational issues and stuff, but here, let's play a song and test it out. See, we have a random order. You can click it, it'll play your songs in random if we had more than one song. And it also has a repeat all tracks, and if you can click it, you can repeat, you can select just repeat one or repeat all. Pretty good stuff. I mean, it's not my favorite, but again, it gets the job done. For video files, Ubuntu has historically come included with a video player, named simply enough, Videos. Now, unlike Rhythmbox, I have never had any issues with Videos. I don't normally use it, and it's because my favorite video player, we'll get to next, is available for Ubuntu. But again, I've never had any issues with it. So let's play a video and check it out. Oh. It appears as if there's something wrong with the codec. Unfortunately, now I'm not sure why that happened. Like I said, I've never had any issues with videos before. Or videos the player, I should say, playing before. So finally, while on the subject of media players, I want to talk about my favorite media player, Vlc Player, or Vlc Media Player. Now, I've been using this again since the mid-2000s, since my time in university. And it's a great, versatile player. It's open source, and this baby will play a brick if you throw it at it. Now, I remember back in university using LimeWire, which is ancient technology. But anyway, sometimes downloading stuff off of LimeWire, stuff wouldn't really finish, and so you get incomplete files. Now, what was really cool about Vlc Player is that it will even play broken or incomplete files most of the time. And it's available for every platform. It's on Windows, it's on Android, it's available for every Linux distribution. I'm not sure about Mac. I believe it is, but I might be wrong about that. And what's really cool about that is that the layout is the same. It's universal, no matter which platform you're using it on. And it's very straightforward, very user-friendly. In addition to playing videos, you can also play music. This is my go-to music app on Linux. It's much easier to create media playlists on here than it is using Retroarch. So I'd highly recommend using this. It's free, it's open source, and Vlc Player just all around kicks ass. But hey, let's check it out. So first, let's play some music. Alright, it works. So now let's check out a video. Alright, and again, it works perfectly, flawlessly, out of the box. So I can't recommend this enough. Also, it has a great support for subtitles, and that's very important for me. My wife isn't a native English speaker, so whenever we watch something together, she likes to use subtitles. And it has great support to that. Another thing I like, if you look at the volume, you can go past 100%. Sometimes you might get a media file where the audio isn't the best, and this is really good for the amplification. So again, I highly recommend this player. Now, this part right here is going to be a bit more geared towards my interests. Now, I really love reading. Reading is quite important to me. I have a hard drive of over 130 GB worth of ebooks. So reading is very important to me, and my ability to be able to have a great reading experience is something that's, it's fundamental to me, not just for my personal life, but also for my work. Also for my study. Now, historically speaking, Ubuntu comes built in with a PDF reader called Events. And I wasn't such a big fan of it in previous builds. It was kind of clunky, it wasn't really fluid. But let's take a look at it in this build and see if anything has changed. Now, to kind of test it, I chosen two PDFs to look at. One, you can see here, is not too big. It's a relatively small one. It's just 12.4 MB, and it's quite a good book. It's one of my favorite books, North Carolina Legends. So let's scroll through it and see how it functions. It's fluid. And we can select text and we can copy it, and that's very important for me because one of the reasons why I like reading ebooks is because it makes taking notes much easier. But this is a small file, well, a relatively small file. So now let's take a look at a much bigger file. Now let's open the 466 MB file. Oh, wow. Now, again, you see it's very smooth, very fluid. No issues. I can select text, I can copy it. Now honestly, I think it's improved since previous builds. So this wasn't my go-to app. If you noticed, I had installed another app called Foxit. That tends to be my go-to app when it comes to using PDFs on Ubuntu. However, unfortunately, Foxit isn't open source, and so in my move to try to be more, to embrace more of the open source lifestyle, I can see in the future me switching more to using events, perhaps, but we'll see. But I have to say I am quite impressed with how far it's come. PDFs are a major file type when it comes to ebooks, but they're not the only type of files that are associated with ebooks. Another common type are EPUBs. Unfortunately, most PDF readers will not read an EPUB, so we're going to need a special reader for that. And so let's check out Calibre. Now, Calibre is a great program. It's open source, and it can read and help organize all types of ebooks files, such as PDFs, Kindle, and much more. I highly recommend using it if you have a huge library and if you want to keep your library organized. It can also do other things such as editing, or even creation as well. Now, if you notice, it's a little slow starting up, but honestly, it's like that on Windows, it's like that on previous builds of Ubuntu, but it's definitely worth the wait. So let's scroll through it and see. Alright, everything seems to be working fine to me. It seems fluid, it seems smooth. We can copy text. Everything works good here. Now, the next portion, and probably the biggest portion of this video, is going to be dealing with gaming. Now, much like many of you all watching, gaming is very important to me. Not only as a content creator, but as just a normal person. Gaming is a pretty big part of my life. And I'm also quite a huge retro gamer as well. So, in our next couple of segments, we're going to be taking some looks at some emulators. Ooh, big scary word, right? Emulators. Now, first and foremost, we're going to turn our attention to an NES emulator, one called Nestopia. Now, when it comes to NES games, Nestopia is my go-to emulator on Ubuntu. Now for Windows, I use some different ones, but on Ubuntu, Nestopia is my go-to one. I've installed it since the second or third day of my using Ubuntu, and I've never had any issues with it. And not only can it run NES games, but it also runs Famicom games as well, which use a disk system. And what's really cool is that Nestopia is open source, and many critics call it or describe it as being highly accurate. And also, they say it's one of the best NES emulators available. And like I said earlier, I've used it since my very early days using Ubuntu, and I've never had any issues with it. And here you can see in my gameplay, you know, everything runs smoothly. So I'd highly recommend it. Now, I've never personally tried this on Windows, but you know, I feel confident in saying give it a shot if you're looking for an NES emulator and you're using Windows. But definitely, if you're using Ubuntu or Linux, give Nestopia a shot. I'm very excited to talk about this next emulator. This next emulator is hands down my favorite, and it's Kega Fusion. And coincidentally enough, it's the very first emulator I ever used. I've been using it since 2006, and it's been my go-to emulator for Sega Genesis or Master System games. Mega Drive games. Sega Genesis or Mega Drive games. And it's also my go-to for Sega 32X, Sega CD, Sega Game Gear, Sega Master System. There we go, finally. That's where Master System should go. But anyway, it's my favorite. And not only is it because I'm a Sega fanboy, I love classic Sega games. But it's also my favorite because it's so reliable. And it's so many emulators in one. Well, it's just one emulator, but it can run all those games for all those systems. And so now, back when I started using Ubuntu, one of the biggest and most pleasant surprises I found was the fact that Kega Fusion was available and ran natively on Ubuntu. Now, one thing I will say is that the ROMs here run absolutely perfect. I've never had any issues with this on Ubuntu. I've never had any issues using this at all running these games. So I'd highly recommend that if you're looking for a emulator for Genesis or Mega Drive, Master System, Sega Game Gear, CD, 32X, all of the early consoles, up into the Sega CD or Sega 32X, by all means check this out. This is even good on Windows as well. I hear it's also been ported to Mac, but I've never used a Mac, so I can't give my opinion there. But I will say on Windows and Linux, it is absolutely awesome. And you know I couldn't show you a Sega emulator without showing you gameplay footage from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Like I said, I can never get away from this game, baby. Now, when we start to talk about N64 emulators, this is where shit starts to get crazy, fam. Now, I've never had any issues using N64 emulators, and my N64 emulator on Ubuntu has been Mupen 64 Plus, and I never had any issues with it in 18.04. But here, it's not so good. Now, initially here, it won't even load my game, as you can see. Now, I did download another version of Mupen 64 or Mupen 64 for Ubuntu, and this one will at least load and run the game. However, the problem with this one is that unfortunately it will not detect my gamepad. So as a final last-ditch effort, I've attempted to download Retroarch and use it. Now again, previously I've used Retroarch, or I do use Retroarch currently in my 18.04 installation of Ubuntu. I've never had any issues with it at all in regards to running N64 games, or running at all for that matter. But as you can see here, unfortunately it freezes upon startup. Now, my initial reaction, or my initial thought to this, well, maybe it's because I did a full installation onto a USB drive as opposed to directly on my hard drive. But then I remembered back in 2020, I actually, did a full installation of Ubuntu 18.04 on a USB drive, and lo and behold, I never had any issues running Mupen 64 or Retroarch on that installation, even though it was a USB drive. So unfortunately, I must conclude that there's something up with the OS itself. Now maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I have a misunderstanding. So if you know something I don't know, or you want to point out something that I've done wrong, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. I would love to remedy this situation. Now, lastly, I want to take a look at some Steam games. And now we're back live, fam. So this is me live, and you're going to hear me, give you my thoughts as I play, as I experience these games. So in our first game we're going to be looking at is Super Star Shooter 16.
Welcome to Super Star Shooter 16.
Alright, so let's give it a go and see what we got.
Level 1, start.
So far everything seems like it's working good.
Humans created machines.
I do love the music in this game.
Humans destroyed their environment. Machines created humans.
So the sound is good. The gameplay is smooth.
New neurons create new transistors. It was easy for the machines to take over.
So far, I am absolutely pleased with the way the gameplay works here. No issues at all, which was, a really, change of pace from my experience with the N64 games. So, So now that we've looked at all of that stuff, I want to give my final thoughts on Ubuntu 22.04 Jammy Jellyfish. Now, there are a lot of really cool things I really loved here. There were a lot of improvements. I love the new organization scheme. I love the aesthetics. I love the new dark mode. It's absolutely beautiful. Also, I love some of the updates to the apps. I love how the PDF reader, is much more fluid now. I love how, it's much easier for me to, use bigger files with it. There are so many things I love about this. However, unfortunately, there are some things that, I didn't really like. Most notably, just the issue with the N64 emulator. Now, I'm a gamer, and so I'm a retro gamer, first and foremost. Also, I do play a lot of indie games as well. So gaming is really important to me. So that kinda is a setback. Now, I am very confident that there's a workaround for that. I just haven't found it yet, unfortunately. And it could very well be something on my end. Now, it's possible it's something on my end. It could be something with this version. I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to research into it yet. But my favorite emulator works. Most of my other gameplay experiences have been awesome. Steam runs fine. I have no issues with Steam, and Steam is only getting better and better for Linux. And that's, thanks partially, or not partially, but in a great deal to the Steam Deck, using a Linux-based OS. So that's to be expected. But, it runs great here on Ubuntu 22.04. Though, the big question now is, will I use this as my daily driver? Will I use this as my main OS? And that's a great question. That is a great question. The answer is a bit complicated for me, and it's not because of the OS itself, but more so my situation. Now, at the present, I don't really have any plans to switch from 18.04. Because I really don't have the time to really go through and, move all my files, back them up, install a new OS, and, move them to the new OS. But in the future, I definitely believe I will be using 22.04. I'm in the process of building a new PC, or saving to build a new PC, I should say. And once that's done, I plan on having 22.04 as my daily driver, and I'm hoping by then some of the kinks would be worked out, if there are any. So I overall I was impressed. I'm impressed with 22.04. It's definitely a huge step up from 20.04. I used 20.04 for like a day and a half. I wasn't feeling it, so I went back to 18.04. But I see Jammy Jellyfish as a greater step up, and I can see myself in the future definitely moving to this as my daily driver. I do love 18.04, but unfortunately, its support is slowly coming to a close. So at some point in time, I'm definitely going to have to move to a newer version. And I see no issue with Jammy Jellyfish besides, a couple things I pointed out in this video. So if you're looking to get into Ubuntu, or you're looking to try Linux for the first time, I would highly recommend Ubuntu 22.04. It's great, it's reliable, and what's really cool is that, maybe you want to give it a shot, but maybe you don't want it to replace your main operating system. And that's cool because you can install Ubuntu alongside your current one on your hard drive. Or also, if you don't want to install it on your hard drive, you can also install it on a USB drive as a full installation. Or you could just simply, make a live disk and try it like that using a USB drive. And if that's something that interests you, one of the things I'm planning on doing for my 100 subscriber celebration is doing a video tutorial about how to do a full installation onto a USB drive, if it's logistically possible for me to record such a thing. But that's going to do it for this video. It's a bit of a long video, kind of jumped around a lot. But I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to be back, a pleasure to see you all again. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls, thank you so much for joining us. Also, thank you to Silver Ice for their help with the voice work. Please give them a follow on Twitter and Twitch at the links below. Also, special thanks to Fran, who does a wonderful job doing my art. A special thanks to all of my friends on Twitter. I wouldn't be here without you all. And most importantly, a special thank you to all of you for watching. Please like this video if you liked it. Dislike it if you dislike it. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. If you like my content, please subscribe and turn your notifications on. And until next time, fam, remember, just be yourself and you'll be awesome. Peace out!